Welcome to the Be All In podcast, guys. I had to apologize. The last week I missed an episode. Just life got in the way, right? I do work a lot and I try to record this on my off time and I just didn't get to it. Not an excuse, just it happens, right? But we're going to keep on trucking. We're going to keep on moving. We're going to keep trying to bring you episodes and interviews that create some value and maybe you can gain something from it. I definitely learned a lot from doing this stuff and hopefully what I learned I can share with you. Again, my name is Raul and this is Be All In. The next thing that I want to do is I want to talk about something that I've been wanting to do for a while. I've been wanting to record this for a while. Not because I didn't want to talk about it, but because I kept asking myself, does anybody actually need to hear this or want to hear this? Most people who find this podcast know me as Raul the paramedic. Some of you know me as husband, dad. Some of you stumbled onto this thing while you're still training and you're still trying to figure out what it is. I'm still trying to figure out what it is and where we're headed. But if you want to understand why this podcast exists now, not just what it covers, but why I want to build it the way I'm building it, I think you need to know the story behind it. And that story starts with my parents. It runs through the friends that I had growing up, the summers that changed how I see people, and the moments in life that handed me some really tough situations, closed doors, and I had to figure out what came next. Eventually, finding a job that I didn't plan on, that turned into a calling that I didn't expect. None of it, absolutely none of it, went the way I thought. And I think that's actually the point. So let me start with my parents. So my parents started over so that me and my brother could have a chance. I was born in Monterrey, Mexico. And growing up, things felt pretty stable, right? They were good. They had a family, we had a house, we had everything that we needed. My dad had a career. My mom worked really hard at the house, taking care of me and my brother. We weren't rich, but we had enough. And when you're a kid, that feels like the whole world. You assume your parents have it all figured out. You assume that tomorrow should look like today. And then one day, it doesn't. See, my dad worked for this company. It's a huge fertilizer company in Mexico. It was government owned, called Fertimex. And when the government decided to close that company, they sold it and everything changed. The career he built, the future everyone expected was gone almost overnight. At the time, I was young enough that I didn't really understand what was happening, but I remember the feeling. I remember the conversations that had a little different weight to them, right? I remember the uncertainty that came into the house. And eventually, my parents made a decision that I didn't think I appreciated at the time, but I think about that all the time now. They decided to leave Mexico, leave their language, their careers, their friends, their family, everything familiar. And I don't think it's because they wanted an adventure. I think it was more like they felt like they had to do it for me and my brother. See, when my dad lost his job after that, he had a hard time trying to figure out the next steps. He went from being like a highly paid office worker, as I say, but it was more like higher up in the company and making really good money to where my mom didn't have to work, to driving a taxi. And then my parents opened a little convenience store in Mexico. And I think things were going well for a while, as I remember. But it was tough. They were gone all the time. My dad was working. My mom was working. My brother and I had to do a lot of things for ourselves as much as we could. I remember doing things that, like, just as simple as taking the bus or walking home from school where they would normally pick us up. And those things disappeared overnight. And it was hard. And looking back, I think it makes me see my parents in a different way through all the pressure that they went through. So when I became a husband and a father, that's when the full weight of that decision hit me. Because I suddenly understood what it costs to start over. It was that fear, the uncertainty, the responsibility of knowing other people's futures depend on the choices you make. My parents didn't talk about it, right? They are Mexican. They didn't talk about resilience. They lived it. And I think that's where I first learned what that actually looks like. We moved to San Antonio, Texas, and we grew up here, and I saw them working, land work, and my mom clean houses just so they could provide for us, for me and my brother, and kind of make the sacrifice worth. And looking back, I see them as sacrificing a lot that eventually led me and my brother to be successful. My brother now, has a family of his own, making money on his own, finishing his career after following his dreams. And I'm very proud of him for that. And it's making the sacrifice that they made to be fruitful. So thanks, bro, for doing that for my parents. For myself, I created a family too, and I have a pretty good career as I go. So I hope I make my parents proud. They tell me they are, but I really hope they do because they sacrifice a lot for us. And that resilience, that character, and it was fortitude that they showed us without ever saying a word. It's just by the actions that they did. One thing that I think doesn't get talked about enough is how much your friends shape your future. Not just who you hang out with on the weekends, but your actual trajectory, your standards, how much you believe in yourself. High school is incredibly hard. You are trying to figure out who you are, where you belong, whether if any of this is going to work out or not. And I got lucky. I found a group of people that made me feel like I had a place. See, when I first moved to the United States, I didn't speak the language, right? I spoke Spanish only, picked English up pretty quick. But all my friends were the Spanish-speaking population of the high school and middle school that I moved to. And always had a hard time because I've always been a different kid. I always wanted to go make friends with people and all that stuff. And the Latino community is kind of very close together and we kind of stick together a lot of times. So when there's a stray that goes out, you tend to make fun of them just for the sake that they're trying to be different. And that was me. So I didn't quite fit in with a lot of people. And this is not a woo me story. This is just, I didn't fit in. And that's the reality of it. And it wasn't until I met 3 friends, well, really 4. 3 I still talk to all the time, and 1 that changed my life forever. And I started hanging out with them. And it went from being almost bullied by my current Spanish-speaking friends to being accepted into a group where my ideas matter, my thoughts matter, my contributions matter, and we had fun. We had a lot of really cool moments, and we pushed each other to become better. I look back on those friendships now, and I realize they weren't just fun. They were formative. People you surround yourself with in those years set a baseline for you're willing to become. Good friends raise your standards. They help you be more of who you actually are instead of some smaller version of yourself. And I had that, and I don't take that for granted. So Michael, Lavon, Anthony, Chris, I'm really thankful for you guys because you guys showed me a different way to live and to grow and to push myself. So kind of going into the high school years, around 16 is when I started. Kind of between the ages of 16 and 21. I volunteer at this summer camp. It was called the Children's Association for Maximum Potential, Camp Camp. It's for children who and adults with disabilities down in Center Point, Texas. And honestly, I didn't know what I was walking in for the first time. Every day I was helping care for kids and adults facing challenges most people never see up close. Physical disabilities, developmental disabilities, complex medical needs. And I had a front row seat to something that changed how I see the world. I remember one of the biggest stories that I have from there is I remember this girl and she was completely in a wheelchair. She couldn't move. She couldn't talk. She was 100% on a ventilator that sustained her life. And one of the things about this camp is that we want to show kids that they could do everything they can that the normal kids can. So they wanted to go get on a horse, they would, and we would help them. They want to get on a kayak or a canoe, we would help them. It was very forward into trying to get these kids to be normal and feel normal. They all loved it. But I remember this one instance where we were supposed to get this child into a kayak, into a canoe. It was a canoe. And obviously she can't hold herself. She can't breathe. You don't want to take the ventilator into the canoe because if it flips, then that's a very expensive piece of equipment that you lose. And so we had to get a VVM, so a valve mask device to put on her trach. And I remember at 16 being handed that over and I was in the kayak with her. And my responsibility was to just squeeze this back so that this person can breathe. I look at it now and I don't think about it now. I do that all the time, right? This is part of my job. It's just something you do. It's the minimal thing that you do. But at the time when you're 16 and you're given that responsibility with that person's life literally in your hands, I think that changes you. And it stuck with me forever. The fact that I could do something for this person too, that I could feel included and for them to have fun and feel like a real person, even if it's next to a bunch of medical people and somebody behind you squeezing a bag so that you can breathe. That's real responsibility that I never thought I could handle. But then you do. Those summers taught me patience, responsibility, how to put someone else's need ahead of my own without thinking of it as a sacrifice. But most of all, it taught me perspective. There were plenty of times in my life where I thought things were hard. And then I spent the weekend camp and I realized that I didn't have the first idea what hard actually was. And I don't mean that in a self-pity way. Like I mean that in a genuinely honest way because it recalibrated me. And I think that's where I first understood that service isn't about becoming important. It's about showing up and being useful. And I think those lessons followed me straight into EMS. So I graduated in 99 and after high school, I thought I knew what came next, right? I was going to join the military. All my friends were joining the military. And this was just a little bit before 9/11. They all went to careers and different branches and I just was stuck. And then 9/11 happened. There was this strong sense of this is the moment. This is how you serve. This is the direction. And I wanted that. I wanted purpose. I wanted to be part of something bigger than myself. But at the time, because of my immigration status, the path wasn't available to me. And I remember feeling really left out and like really out of place. My friend Chris ended up going to West Point. Had a couple of other friends that went into intelligence and Marines and Navy, and the one that I wanted to go to was the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, but those weren't the cards for me, and it was hard. I remember feeling like everyone around me had a direction, and I was still standing still, like I'd missed something, right? And you know what? I'm not going to pretend that it was easy, because it wasn't. But here's what I know now. If that door had opened, I'd be a completely different person right now. Completely different, living a completely different life. There wasn't the uncertainty I felt back then. It was the thing that actually pushed me towards what it actually fit. Closed doors have a way of doing that, and you don't see it until later. Then I found EMS. Or maybe it found me, I don't know. I'm still unsure which was which. But for the first time in a while, I had a direction, purpose, real responsibility. I wasn't just trying to figure out my next move. I was showing up on some of the worst days of people's lives and actually doing something. I talked about earlier in another podcast about this call where this girl was trapped underneath a car and I saw her die. And she looked me straight in the eye and said, "Please don't let me die." And at the time I was an EMT basic, so I didn't have a lot of power to do anything or any of the skills or durability to do it. But I remember at that time, that call is what made me think, okay, I got to do more. I got to be the person that actually is in control of the situation and changes the direction, hopefully for the better. I think I realized that was the moment that I noticed that I needed to be something more. I think EMS matured me faster than anything else could have. It reinforced everything I learned at camp. That service matters, that people matter, that showing up and doing the work matters, even when nobody sees it. And it became a huge part of who I am. So there was a moment where I think everything came full circle. In 2021, my dad had colon cancer. And suddenly the man who had always been there, the one that was always carrying things, the one who was there when I needed help, turned into somebody that I needed to help. He went from being the provider to being the one that needed help. And I can't even remember when I got the news, but I was a time in my life where I had just gotten fired from my jobs. Well, not really fired, but the restaurant that I was working shut down and I couldn't make my bill payments for the apartment because I was pretending to be an adult at the time. And this happened, and then I moved back home with my parents so that I can help out. And I remember things hitting different. I remember when I got the news feeling frustrated and scared because my dad, the person that I knew to be so dependable and hardworking, all of a sudden was out for the count. Colon cancer was a bitch. We were lucky. The sense that he didn't need chemo, he just needed a surgery to remove part of the colon, but it required a long recovery and a long hospitalization stay. And I remember feeling lucky that I couldn't find a job because then I could take care of my dad. And I did. And thankfully he made it through and he's been now clear for more than 20 years, cancer-free. That's pretty cool. But I remember at the time I had to kind of step up and man up and provide. So I actually stepped up. I started taking care of my dad's business. My dad had a lawn mowing business at the time that helped us provide for the family, pay the bills, pay the house, pay the rent, pay the lights. And I just took over. I had already kind of been helping him out a little bit here and there, but I completely took all his clients and I did it on my own with sometimes help of my brother. And I'll tell you something that happened through that experience that I didn't expect. I stopped seeing my dad as only my dad. I started seeing him as a man, as a husband, as a provider, someone who has spent decades carrying responsibility without making it everybody else's problem. And for the first time, that weight was on my shoulders. And that's when I really got it. I didn't just understand it. I actually felt it, like the sacrifice, the pressure, what it costs to keep things together for the people you love. For the first time, I wasn't learning about it. I was living it. So kind of moving on, months later, I met my wife. Simple, met at a bar through a friend, and we kind of hit it off. And it's the rest is history. Here we're sitting here 18 years later and, still going strong. This isn't a love episode, but it needs a real moment. Sorry, guys. I got a little something in my throat. Just got to drink a little bit. Hold on. Nothing like good orange juice with tahini, right? So marriage changed my priorities in ways that I didn't fully anticipate. My decisions weren't just mine anymore. My choices rippled out way further than me. And that changes how you think. And then came fatherhood. And I remember holding my child for the first time and feeling, wow, this is going to change my life forever. And I always knew that it would. I would dedicate my life to them just like my parents did for me. But it hit me in a different way that I never truly understand. Everybody tells you that kids change your life and you don't get it until you have kids. And it's kind of true. I didn't get it until I had my kid. And I think about my parents very differently now because I am now the one that's carrying the same fears they carried, the same hopes, the same desires to create something that my kids can build on. The thing I thought I understood then, I actually understand now. I'll tell you when it kind of really hit for me. And I went to South by Southwest with a cousin of mine. Now, my cousin was a super cool person. Everybody loved him. He was always the life of the party, always partying, drinking, smoking. And at the time, I thought I wanted that. I thought I wanted that life. And because I was still young, right? I was only 31. I wanted to go, and my wife didn't want to go. And I remember being at South by Southwest at a bar. And I was just looking around and just thinking, Raul, what are you doing here? You have a family at home. You have a daughter at home that you need to be there for. What is this? So I remember I just got up, didn't say bye to anybody, walked out of the bar, smoked a cigarette. I used to smoke at the time. And I just went home. And then I gave my family a huge hug and I lay down in bed with them. And that moment for me was so pivotal because it made me realize who I needed to become in order to be a good father and a person and a provider. That moment changed my life forever. Rudy, rest in peace. I miss you, but that moment changed my life. And I'm kind of thankful for you for that. So I think I understand things differently now because of all that stuff that's happened to me in the past. So why does Be All In exist? When people ask me why I started this podcast, the really easy answer is, well, because I was an EMS, right? But that's not real. The real answer is everything I just told you. It's watching my parents leave everything behind to give me and my brother a chance. The friends who helped me find my footing. Those summers at camp where I first learned what being successful actually meant. The door that closed and forced me somewhere to be better. Then finding EMS and finally having a reason to show up. My dad getting sick, teaching me something about strength that I couldn't have learned any other way. Becoming a husband and a father and finally feeling what responsibility actually weighs. All of it. Life is heavy. Responsibility is heavy. Pressure is heavy. And most people are carrying more than they can ever say out loud. I think that's why I made this. I don't want to motivate people. I'm not a motivator. I'm not a guru. I'm not any of that. So I'm still trying to figure it out on my own. But I'm not going to pretend any of this is easy. But the hope is that I can sit with people who are carrying something and make them feel a little less alone in it. When I was younger, I thought strength looked like confidence, like having all the answers, like being the person who never seemed rattled. I don't think that anymore. I think strength looks like two parents choosing to start over in a country where nothing was guaranteed. It looks like families caring for kids with needs most of the world never will understand. It looks like friends showing up to help you and become more of yourself. It looks like a father working through a cancer diagnosis without letting it break the people around him. It looks like the ordinary people every day carrying extraordinary weight without recognition of it. That's what this podcast has always been about. Not success, not status, but learning how to carry responsibility without losing yourself in the process. Learning how to build when things don't go the way you planned. Learning how to stay grounded when the pressure is real. My life didn't go according to plan, and I'm genuinely grateful for that. Thanks for being here, and thanks for listening to this one. Be all in.